Hello and welcome to BenOMTAD, a podcast of open-minded thought and discussion about connecting with wisdom and growing in insight. Here I recount and discuss folk tales, myths, and philosophy with various people, hoping to grow through dialogue. Today's episode is about the Greek god Dionysus, the god of wine, who resembles both the plant from which the fermented drink comes and its various effects on human beings. Hence he is a god of connection and creativity, but also destruction and death, and so our discussion proceeds from the spirit and body, so to speak, of that god, to rebirth and transformation of life and civilizations. Thank you for listening, and please join the discussion in the comments and in your own notes. Ian's going to read a primary source on Dionysus, a short poem, and then I'm going to give a little, just kind of general introduction from the book Mythology by Edith Hamilton on him, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Let's see. So this is one of the Orphic hymns from sometime between, I think, 2 BC and 4 AD was the guess, if I remember correctly. This is a hymn to Dionysus. Dionysus I call, loud roaring and divine, primeval god, a twofold shape is thine. Thy various names and attributes I sing, O twice born, thrice begotten Bacchic king. Wild, ineffable, two-formed, obscured, two-horned, with ivy crowned, howling pure, bull-faced and warlike, bearer of the vine, endowed with counsel prudent and divine, triennial, whose leaves of vines adorn, of Zeus and Persephone occultly born, immortal diamond, hear my supplicant voice, give me in blameless plenty to rejoice, and listen, gracious, to my mystic prayer, surrounded by thy choir of nurses fair.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Before we go on to the kind of general introduction, do you have thoughts about that?
I read this first time I've read it fully out loud, but I love the rhythm of it. It just rolls right off the tongue. I will say, since we are going into the general thing that you are reading, that this is based in an older version of the Dionysian myth. There's sort of two forms that I think I'll probably touch on later, but this is based on the older one where he is the son of Zeus and Persephone.
Right.
It's part of the Orphic tradition, which I think I will probably also touch on later, I hope, if I manage to get through all of my notes. But it's sort of a different branch. And in fact, it even kind of touches on that. It says he's twofold shaped, twice born, two formed. Sort of they keep talking about him as sort of these two versions of himself, and born 3 times, which I think also gets explained in his story. But yeah, so just bring some of that energy into the room before we get going, as out of honor and respect for the person whose story we're telling, or the divinity whose story we're trying to bring together here.
I like that respect and maybe calling forth his spirit a little bit.
Yeah.
So this is just a general introduction from Mythology by Edith Hamilton. So Dionysus, she categorizes him as one of the 2 earth gods, sort of newer than the other one, Demeter or Ceres, sort of like Cereal, the goddess of grain. And he was the only properly considered god that whose parents were not both divine. So his father was Zeus, and his mother was Princess Semele. And she was, Zeus had many lovers and earthly lovers, and she was unfortunate in that she extracted from him a promise, and he swore on the underworld's river Styx that he would grant her this promise. And then he was dismayed when she told him what it was, what her request was, because it was that he should show his true form to her in all its glory, because he knew that that would kill her. So he did it, and it killed her and burned her up. And he took the nearly born child from her and hid it in his side, away from his jealous wife Hera, of course. Um, and then once it was born, Hermes it, spirited young Dionysus away to this beautiful valley that no earthling, no mortal, I should say, has seen before, and he was cared for by nymphs of that place, Nisus. So once he grew to adulthood, he wandered far to strange places. I sort of think of it like he wandered all over the earth, all over the known world to the Greeks. And he was preaching his way, getting men to cultivate the vine and to into his mysteries. And he didn't encounter a problem until he kind of came back to his home kind of area, Thebes. And he was seen by a pirate ship, and they kind of looked on his lovely form, and they decided to kidnap him. When they took him on board, he was not phased. They tried to bind him, but they could not. And only the helmsman, the person who was steering the ship, understood that he was a god and they should not be messing with him. And he said they should let him go. But everyone else, including the captain, just mocked him, laughed at him, and so they rushed him, and they decided to set sail. And the wind filled the sails, but the ship would not move. And then terrible miracles started happening. Fruiting vines grew all over the ship, and then Dionysus turned into a lion, and he sent all the sailors uh, off the ship, and they became dolphins, except for the helmsman, whom he had compassion for having recognized him. Um, yes, so then he keeps kind of traveling. He goes through Thrace, and the king there, Lycurgus, opposed the new worship that Dionysus was preaching. And Dionysus at first ran away from him. He retreated. He even took refuge from him in the depths of the sea. But later he came back, and he overpowered Lycurgus, and he punished him. But he didn't kill him. He imprisoned him within a rocky cave. However, the other gods were not so clement. Zeus struck Lycurgus blind, and he died soon after that. So Dionysus keeps wandering. He comes upon a princess of Crete, Ariadne, who was abandoned by Theseus, whom she had saved the life of. And she was like on an island. And he rescued her. He loved her, and in the end, he took a crown that he had given her, ivy crown, and placed it among the stars. And so, yes, the mother whom he had never met was not forgotten. So he longed for her. He descended into the underworld to seek her, and in the end, he prevailed over death, and he brought her up and into Olympus. And yes, even though she was a mortal, she was deemed, because she was the mother of a true god, she was deemed to fit to dwell there with the immortals. Yeah, the nature of the god of wine, he could be kind and beneficent, or he could be cruel and drive men to frightful deeds. Um, the his followers were these wild women, the Maenids or the Bacchantes, and they could be driven to frenzy with wine. Uh, they did not worship him like the other gods were worshipped in the cities with orderly temples. He was worshipped in nature, and the Maenads carried sticks tipped with pine cones. So, yeah, the worship, here's a quote: the worship of Dionysus was centered in these two ideas so far apart, of freedom and ecstatic joy, and of savage brutality. The god of wine could give either to his worshippers. And then, so one last story as he's traveling, there's another king, this one of Thebes, his home. And the king's name was Pentheus, and he was actually the son of Dionysus's mother, Semele's sister. So it was his own cousin. But again, there's this theme of somebody somebody ruling, not recognizing Dionysus as a god, and he ordered his guards to seize and imprison the visitors, Dionysus and his followers who had come ecstatic, visiting his city. But of course, like in these stories, he is warned by the blind seer, the blind prophet Tiresias, the man you reject is a new god, and he identified him and everything. But of course, the king did not listen, and he also saw that Tiresias was tricked out like the wild women, wreath of ivy on his white hair, shoulders covered with fawn skin, and he had the pine tipped stick in his hand. So he ordered him out of his sight. Dionysus was led in before him by the band of his soldiers, who had actually been ashamed and had told the god that they were under orders and not acting of their own free will. And they told the king also that the prisoners, the followers of Dionysus, who they had imprisoned, had actually escaped, and the bonds could not hold them either. And then, of course, in this telling, at least, Pentheus is rough, is mocking of Dionysus, and Dionysus is calm, and he says he is divine, and he says, "You cannot keep me in prison. God will set me free." And Pentheus says something like, "I cannot see him here," and Dionysus says, "He is here. You just can't see him because your vision is not pure." He tried to Dionysus tried to persuade Pentheus. The persuasion didn't work. And then eventually Dionysus showed himself in his terrible aspect. And so when Dionysus escaped, Pentheus went to pursue him in the hills, and Dionysus made his followers all mad, including some of the women of the city that had followed Dionysus's Maenids, uh, including Pentheus's own mother. And Dionysus made them all mad, and they saw Pentheus as a cougar, some kind of wildcat, and they tore him to pieces. And then, of course, after they woke up from their frenzy, they his mother was in agony. So that was kind of the just the little introduction from that book, Mythology by Hamilton.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, that story of Pentheus, the version of it I found, and I wish it's in a play by one of the famous Greek plays. I feel like I should know this.
Hmm.
Um,
Not Sophocles.
no, I don't think so. Well, I'm not going to find it, but I'm
Hmm.
embarrassed. I'm embarrassed not to know. My classic education is my lack of a classical education is showing. But the version of it I heard is he manages to convince Pentheus to to sort of come with him, but Pentheus wants to go up and sort of spy on the women doing the ecstatic thing. And Dionysus brings him out of the city dressed as a woman and brings him up, but the women, the Bacchantes or the Maenids are they either see him or they suss him out or something, and they realize he's no good, and then they see him as a lion and they kill him and they tear him apart, like you're saying. And his mother tears his head off and sticks his head on top of her wand or her pine cone staff, or
Yeah.
there's some argument pine cone. There's some argument that it was fennel, which
Hmm.
is not a very strong plant, so I'm not sure how that works. There's some argument that it was just a spear, but whatever it was wrapped in ivy to sort
Hmm.
of symbolize maybe both the forwardness and the sort of patience, the sort of calm that's required for that.
Hmm.
Um, the ivy being sort of like a protective thing. But she takes his head and sticks it on a spear and brings it back into town and shows her father, so Pentheus's grandfather, look what I found. Look, I killed this lion, aren't I brave? Look, I've got his head right here. And in that moment, she like the madness fades and she realizes it's her son, and it's grief and tragedy all around. Classic Greek tragedy.
Sounds like a
Um,
terrific story. I mean, man, that really
yeah.
takes it up a notch.
Yeah. I want to go back and read some more of these some of these Greek plays because they sound I know the stories because I've heard them summarized like in that book, but I've never actually gone and read. I think maybe in high school we had read Lysistrata, or maybe that was college I read it. I remember reading Lysistrata at some point, which is a funny play, but is not very it's not a tragedy, it's a comedy.
Hmm.
Um Yeah, and I don't know. You touched on like a lot of the stories that I had found as well in my research, um, in sort of trying to prepare for this. Shout out to my friend William for all of the links. I greatly appreciate that. Um, but I kind of want to take it back for a minute, if I could, to kind of an earlier version of Dionysus, that I had briefly touched on, and I think it is really interesting to hold the idea of everything that you just said, the sort of the Semele and Zeus and Dionysus being um, nurtured in Zeus's body. I had heard it was his thigh. This book says it's his belly. Whatever it is, it's somewhere central.
Hmm.
The idea of like Zeus with the pregnant bulge on his thigh is weird as hell, but um, that's what it is. So he, so holding all of that against this other version and seeing the sort of the ways they mirror each other has been really fascinating to me, and I hope I can do it justice.
Hmm.
It's a little scattered. That's maybe not the easiest thing for me to put together, but I'm gonna try.
Hmm.
Um, so the version that I have comes from the Mycenaean era, which I think is basically prior to, and I'm going to be referring to my notes a lot here. The Mycenaean era, which I think is prior to the Hellenic era. I think it was sort of like Copper Bronze Age Greece was the Mycenaeans, and then Iron Age into the modern era was maybe the Hellenic Greeks. I'm not entirely sure about that, but there's definitely a spread there, and we're talking about the earlier end of the spectrum.
Hmm.
Um, And so let's see what my notes are. Um, so in this myth, he's also known as Zagreus, um, which apparently there's a video game called Hades that involves somebody named Zagreus and Hades and Dionysus and all the other gods and things. So I don't know what that's about, but it's very interesting that his name still shows up in modern pop culture, you know.
Hmm.
So what we have from the Mycenaean era is a list of sacrifices that were made to the gods. And so we have a list of the gods' names, but we don't have any other information. We don't have any real stories about them. We just know that Dionysus's name shows up on this list, and that Hades' name doesn't.
Oh,
So
that's
there's
funny.
so there's no on this Mycenaean list. There's no real like god of the underworld in the sense that if Dionysus is the god of wine, then there's nobody to fill the role of the god of the underworld.
Hmm.
However, one of the papers my friend sent me is by this scholar, Nicola Miredu. I'm probably butchering that, and my apologies to her. But she sort of pieces together this Mycenaean list of gods, and later the it's called the Derveni Papyrus, which is where we get a lot of these Orphic myths, the hymn that I read at the beginning, and a lot of other things. That whole kind of tradition is mostly just spoken about in other sources, but we did find this one sort of cache of sort of direct papyrus, I suppose. Um, and it's from that we get this idea that perhaps Dionysus was considered the god of the underworld in this earlier time, and that sort of mythology, that story of him either disappears, like it just fades out, and then we get this new one that you just read, or perhaps it gets sort of wrapped into these Orphic mysteries and is taken underground and sort of maintained there. The old ways are sort of maintained while these new ones kind of come in.
Hmm.
So obviously, I'm not a historian. I don't know the specifics, but that's what it's been suggesting to me.
Hmm.
Um, and she sort of thinks that at that point when the Hellenic civilization started to develop, the sort of later civilization started to develop, that what was originally Dionysus sort of splits into this Bacchus figure that you're talking about and Hades. Again, you've got this as in that poem that I read, sort of double natured element of the god. Um, and she claims that Hades, which actually translates as the invisible,
Hmm.
supposedly, that Hades is actually started off as a title or an epithet, an honorific for Dionysus.
Hmm.
So it was like a way of referring to him without using his name,
Hmm.
when he was in his role as Lord of the Underworld. And then the underworld itself is also called Hades, the invisible realm, the other
Hmm.
world where the dead people go. Makes sense to me. And so sort of the realm and the nickname sort of took on their own persona and became sort of that became the new form of the Lord of the Underworld.
Hmm.
But back in the old days, we had the sort of the lineage goes, you had Kronos and Rhea were sort of the parents of the gods. And this I think at least that matches Hesiod and the later Greeks. But Kronos is the one that was very jealous of his children and would eat them.
Hmm.
And Rhea was very sad and sort of despairing that her husband had been eating all of their children. And so she protects Zeus and she hides him away in a cave. And then in traditional storytelling, Zeus comes back, kills Kronos, slits open his belly, rescues all his brothers and sisters, and they go on to become the Olympian gods. In this story, Zeus and Rhea, they go off to a cave in that fucked up way that gods and goddesses do. Zeus and Rhea have sex. They have a child. That child is Persephone. Then Zeus and Persephone have sex. Their child is Zagreus, Dionysus.
Hmm.
So within this lineage, you have Kronos as sort of the overarching ruler of the gods, who is replaced by Zeus, and Dionysus is seen as the coming replacement of Zeus. Like he's going to be the next overlord of the gods,
Hmm.
to the point that when he is born, he goes up to Olympus and he climbs up on Zeus's throne and he's grabbing the lightning bolts and he's like waving them around. I just see this image of like this little toddler kid waving around these lightning bolts. And this sort of implies that he's there to eventually he's going to grow into Zeus's place,
Hmm.
which doesn't seem to bother Zeus as far as from what I could tell.
Hmm.
But um, the Titans come and they kidnap baby Dionysus. Maybe they lure him away or something, but they kidnap him and they take him and they roast him and they chop him up and they eat him.
Mm.
And so here we have sort of the first example of something being torn, sort of limb from limb, the head being ripped off, the arms being ripped off. So Pentheus. Later, hopefully, we get into Orpheus. I want to bring Orpheus into this as well. But you have in this original Dionysus, he's torn apart and eaten by the Titans, who are symbolic of the wild forces of nature that were ruling the world before the gods even got there. So I think maybe Kronos and Rhea were considered Titans. I'm not sure. They were sort of the
I think
parents
so, yeah.
of all the gods. But so this would be sort of just the wild forces. They come and they tear Dionysus apart, which I think we all have had an experience of something beautiful and divine in our life that was sort of torn apart by random circumstance and sort of just natural unfolding of the world. So perhaps we can relate. But in this case, Zeus gets real mad, understandably, because here's his basically his heir has been treated like an animal, roasted on the fire and eaten for pleasure. So he comes down with his lightning bolts and he kills the Titans, zaps them. They kind of explode, and they out of the remnants of the Titans, the ash that's left over, that's where humanity comes from. So in this version of the myth, we have humanity as the product of this sort of brutal, natural, somewhat evil, evil side, and this divine side as well. And we have Dionysus as almost like a Christ-like figure in that it's his essence that makes the divine and human. So he's got this link to humanity that the other gods don't in this particular story. Um, Meanwhile, I think Demeter, Demeter, what was the series, however you want to name her, I think she's the one. She manages to find his heart in and amongst all the things, and she takes his heart and sort of resurrects him from that heart. So he comes back. Perhaps that's the third birth. I'm not sure if that's the reference there, but he comes back again, and at that point, I think we don't really know. Or at least I couldn't find anything. But in this paper by this scholar, Nicola Moretu, she then links to these bits of gold that were left over. Trying to see if I can find more details of my notes here, but I don't think I have them. These golden leaves that were left over the mouths and the chests of some burial chambers, mounds in a Greek colony in what's now Ukraine. So sort of a satellite thing, but the the leaves had a text written on them that was instructions on what to do when you die. Um, and so let's see if it says. So these are, they believe, part of the Orphic rites. So again, we have a link to Orpheus and Dionysus. Sort of the Orphic rites is carrying this old myth of Dionysus. And these leaves would tell the people that when they when they die and they're going down into Hades, into the underworld, there will be a spring on the right side, and standing by the spring is a white cypress. And most of the souls that go to the underworld will go to that spring to refresh themselves because the dead are very thirsty.
Hmm.
And so they just kind of run and they get water as soon as they can find it. And the advice is do not go to that spring. Ahead of it, you will find a lake of memory where cold water is pouring forth, and there are guards. If you go up to the guards and they will ask you what you are seeking, you say, I am the son of earth and starry sky. I am parched for thirst and I am dying. Quickly grant me cold water from the lake of memory to drink. And these guardians will announce you to the Chthonian king, the ruler of the underworld, who in this case it's suggested is Dionysus. Um, and they will let you drink from this lake of memory. And having drunk, you will go along the sacred road on which the other, in the underworld, you drink the memory, you'll remember things, and you'll go along the sacred road where the other glorious initiates and Bacchoi travel. So there you have sort of, I think that's why they sort of suggest this might be Dionysus, is because it does link to the Bacchoi, the Bacchantes, the sort of wild
Mm,
worshippers of Bacchus Dionysus.
mm,
Um, so it's very interesting to me that you have this whole other side myth. And I think in those days, you didn't have, you had papyrus, but you didn't have printing presses, and you certainly didn't have any forms of communication that went beyond sort of mouth to mouth for the most part. And so you could go, a couple islands over or across the Mediterranean, and they would have grown an entirely different culture around the sort of basic forms of the divinities. And so I don't know if this was a parallel thing or, like I said, an older thing, but it is fascinating to me that we have these sort of two versions of Dionysus, to the point that the Orphic hymn even references him as double-natured. Um, and if he is both Lord of the Underworld and later comes back via Semele in the story that you told and has to go to the underworld and negotiate for his mother's freedom. It's this um like journey of himself to petition himself as Hades to let his new mother go. Um I love the symbolism. I just can't, it doesn't paint a rational picture, but it's still, you see these patterns echo through it. And I really like that.
mm.
So I don't know, I'll stop there if you have anything to say.
Well, yeah, I do like the, multiple kinds of stories that are different and learning different stories about the same personages in any sort of tradition. You can, it's interesting. And, you would think you could get more of an idea of what this thing is, this multifaceted thing or this complex kind of thing. Um, and that there's something good about this kind of thinking, this analysis, this taking in of different facets, different faces of something for contemplation and for, yeah, creativity, which can lead to, I think, renewal in a single artist's mind for works that they might write or make, or in a culture. So yeah, I like all that. I guess
Let's go ahead.
I guess one thing, I mean, that keeps coming up simply is the association of Dionysus with death in various ways. And of course, there is the simple association with physical death, of lack of inhibition among human beings, and violence. There is in a more complex and subtle way, maybe something about the polity, um, the civilization itself, and trying to prevent death, violent death, or things like that. Civilization and society itself is a way that human beings have been able to survive more than other animals by our complex grouping. And of course, you know, scientists will talk about how we're an ultra social species because we can get together with a number far greater than Dunbar's number of whatever it is, 150 or so. We, you know, we can feel a part of the same group uh, more than just the number of people that we know face to face, that we groom, that we touch, and everything. Can get we can get together with people we're only connected to by myths and images and language and things like that. And very soon after meeting those people, we're ready to fight and die with them and trust them and everything. So, yeah, so that was just thinking of that association. It's a seemingly complex association of Dionysus and death.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I really like it's funny I don't think you were referencing it directly with Dionysus, but you were talking about the facets and the sort of renewal that can bring about. And I think one of the patterns I see through this sort of dual Dionysian myth is um, if you have a civilization that has grown up out of the wilderness in the way you're talking about this sort of human civilization. And you can see that as being a switch from the Titans to the Olympians, the sort
Mm,
of the wild gods to the civilized gods.
mm,
Um, and if we follow this Orphic myth, you have Dionysus Zagreus coming through as the successor to Zeus. So he will perhaps lead a new pantheon of gods at some point, or he's sort of the way the Olympians replace the Titans. Maybe he'll come along and replace the Olympians at some point.
mm,
And in the meantime, he's kind of down in the underworld because he's forgotten. Usually, the underworld is places where things are forgotten or they're waiting. Um, um, and then you have him reborn from Semele later, and the version that I read has Hera sort of hounding him repeatedly. So Hermes takes him off, like you said, and has him raised by the nymphs. But I think Hera comes and drives them mad, and then Hermes takes him and brings him to this older couple, and Hera comes and um, one of them she drives them both mad, and one of them like runs off into the woods, and the other one dives off a cliff.
mm,
And Hermes comes and saves Dionysus again and takes him
mm,
somewhere else and dresses Dionysus up as a woman, as a little
mm,
girl, and so gets by Hera that way and has him raised maybe by satyrs. I'm not sure,
mm,
um, but I think if it is satyrs, I think that's maybe where he starts picking up the wine and the vinting, the vintaging
mm,
and all that, the grapes to crushing to wine, um, and. And then he goes on about, and then I think Hera finds him and does curse him with insanity, and that starts his
mm,
wanderings. And
mm,
he ends up meeting Rhea, who would be his grandmother in the earlier myth, or even in this one,
mm,
if he's the son of Zeus, regardless of if it's
mm,
Persephone or Semele who sort of gave birth to him, he's still sort of Rhea's Zeus. So yeah, he would be the grandson of Rhea. So he
mm,
comes across Rhea and she heals him of the madness.
mm,
She manages to sort of wipe Hera's curse away. And at that point, Dionysus starts wandering. So there's this sense of him being unwelcomed where he is. There's some sense of Zeus or Hera or something of the Olympiad gods keeping him at bay in one way or another. And then
mm,
and he comes back and he's got followers and he's doing this thing
mm,
um, um, and he and yet like with Pentheus he's not welcome with Lycurgus he's not welcome, he's not seen, he's not recognized.
mm,
And so if you have this new force coming in to sort of revitalize or change the culture. If the culture rejects it, the culture is destroyed.
mm,
And I think that's what we see with these rulers being torn limb from limb. Had they recognized the new god, if they had recognized this force that was coming in, perhaps they would have been reborn. But so it did not happen.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so it's just the sense of, did the Greeks bring in, did they welcome in a rebirth? I mean, I think this gets into the Nietzschean, which I also don't understand very much, but I've read a little bit, the birth of tragedy. Why were the Greeks so focused on tragedy?
Mm.
And he comes up with the oft discussed Apollonian and Dionysian urges, the sort of building, constructing, civilizing, and the wild, the unpredictable, the chaotic. Um, I think it's more complicated than that, but that's the part I've never quite been able to wrap my head around with Nietzsche. It's a little dense. But they're definitely set up as opposing forces, and I believe with Nietzsche, he wanted them brought together. He wanted that he was under the impression that the Greeks at the time were growing kind of stale as a culture. Their culture was sort of collapsing in on itself. I think it was described in the source I read of like Zeus falling asleep on Olympus. Like he's not quite there anymore. Um, and you have Apollo being sort of the civilizational structure that kind of holds that and kind of builds
Mm.
that and tries to refine it and refine the forms, refine the forms. And you have Dionysus as the chaos. He is not form. He is energy. If you got, if we want to go Einstein here, E equals MC squared.
Mm.
Energy is matter. So you've got matter and you've got energy, and you've got the energy kind of trying to come in, and Apollo is at first opposing him. Now later, supposedly the priests of Dionysus were welcomed, and they were ensconced at Delphi with Apollo's priests, and there was sort of a balance made. And perhaps, again, I'm not sure my Nietzsche, but perhaps Nietzsche points to that as, or at least it would make sense for that to be sort of like, oh, Greece had managed to bring in this new energy and ensconce it alongside the old gods and sort of have that rebirth that you're talking about. So they'd have these sort of multiple facets of divinity. It can grow, it can change, it can die, it can be reborn. Dionysus is someone who has died and been reborn, gone to the underworld, come back, been driven mad and become sane again. So he's able to cross boundaries and hold paradoxes sort of naturally without it being destructive to himself.
Mm.
And perhaps that was what led to sort of the second flowering of Greek culture and why we all look back on them so fondly. Um, and would also imply maybe why Dionysus was the patron theater, because if he is sort of this tragic, disruptive force, theater can also be very destructive. A well-told story will summon up emotions that you didn't know you had. They come in like this foreign deity and they just sort of move your world around. And you're like, oh my God, I didn't even know I could feel that way, you know? So I think there's a lot to that. I don't know necessarily what it goes to, but
Yeah, death and transformation. Um, you mentioned the theater. Do you know, I mean, was he just sort of like the patron saint, the patron god of the theater, or something like that?
yeah, I'm not sure what that link was. I wish I knew more about that particular aspect, but it didn't come up much in the sources I was reading. I
Mm.
just know that that's something along with wine and along with, other things
Mm.
that we've talked about, sort of the madness and the wildness, the creativity and the uncivilized, the natural, um, that he's also associated with theater, but I don't know. To me, it doesn't make sense. I would think maybe like a trickster Mercury maybe would be
Mm.
somebody that I would think more of as theatrical, just in that he's always playing tricks on people, his
Mm.
disguises, like you're
Mm.
not really sure what's going on. But the place of theater in Greek culture is definitely more powerful than I think I understand. I
Yeah.
think it was transformative for them in a
Yeah.
certain way. And I'm not, I've been to a lot of musicals. They're great, but I don't feel transformed coming out of,
Yeah.
the Book of Mormon or,
Yeah.
what is it? Hamilton, like they're great
Mm.
plays, but I don't feel like I'm a different person. But
Yeah.
I think maybe the Greeks it was a different thing with them. So.
Yeah, that's fascinating to think about. I don't know much about that, but I've heard that too. Aristotle it was something like a religious experience, supposedly.
Hmm.
Aristotle said something about that, the transformation of it. There's something, I mean, yeah, you're mentioning musicals that we go to, plays that we go to. It's sort of like a little bit of a posh thing in our culture. It's not like everybody goes to it or enough of everybody for it to, I don't know, for you to feel it. You know, we live in vast megalopolises compared to their just simple polis of, five to like a big city was maybe something like 50 or 100,000 people back then. And that's not even a big suburb for us. And so I don't know, just even imagining almost everybody in your city coming together and experiencing one thing is kind of powerful, even to just think about, Like, I mean, whatever it was, it could be a sporting event, but for almost everybody to be there and you could see everybody, that and experiencing the same thing, that in itself. And then of course, if it's something that is deeply meaningful to you, like the you may believe in those gods and you've been raised up in that, this story by heart, and then to see really good actors enacting it, I think there's something. Yeah, I can see there being some kind of transformation about it. It's not an ironic thing. It's not a commentary kind of thing. I mean, you know what I mean by not a commentary directly. I mean, obviously, it can help you reflect. For a reflective person, it can help you reflect on who you as an individual and you as a polis are. And you know, but yeah, it would be interesting to kind of be able to understand that a little bit more. Um, that
Yeah.
transformation.
Well, I like the sort of picture you paint of the world that, potentially this would have been happening in, where it's sort of everybody coming together and having this combined, shared emotional cathartic journey,
I
perhaps,
was
or
thinking of that
tragic
word. Yeah, I
journey,
didn't say that. Yeah.
Um, and I was thinking, nowadays sporting events or concerts, people kind of have a similar strong emotional journey through. Um, but I can see, again, especially if we hold up this sort of Nietzschean Apollo versus Dionysus, in this case, I can see the theater maybe being almost like a door to the unconscious or something, or a door to something deeper, and that you have especially in these days, you don't have books, you don't have movie theaters, you don't have
Mm.
laptops and Netflix. You work, and then you have free time. And when you have free time, all of a sudden there's this thing where you can go and a story is enacted live in front of you. And I think the Greek plays had a chorus that was like a stand-in for the audience, so it would even sort
Yeah,
of
something like that.
echo back what the audience was thinking or likely
Yeah.
saying or something. Again, not
Yeah.
my area of expertise, but I know there was some link between the chorus and the audience. There was some sort of like the chorus was a representation of the audience in the play or something like that. And so to go there and sort of have this thing brought to life in front of you and have yourself represented in that way would almost kind of both split you out of yourself, and that you're examining something in the real world that is oftentimes just in your head, but you're also doing it with a bunch of other people, um, and seeing. So there's this mirroring in that way of entering a space that's outside of your everyday life, and yet your everyday life is with you because it's all the people and it's the stories that you've heard, but it's a world. You're watching a world that but that is very unfamiliar to your everyday life. And then from that story comes these emotions. And so it could be sort of an opening for some kind of so unconscious contents to come up into the consciousness, the way that a Dionysian urge, a wildness, If the structure of the mind, the Apollonian structure, the tightness, the form of the mind is able to relax and open, that new energy can come into it and sort of have that rebirth effect. Um, so I could see it working that way, and it would sort of back up the idea of Dionysus as sort of this new current, this that the world can get stuck in its form. The world can get used to what we all think it is, and we need something that will crack that open. And Dionysus is maybe the energy that comes through when we are managed to be cracked open in that way. It's the newness. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was very well told. Uh, and I was thinking, how is it that Dionysus could be the one to help bring us into that uh, new world? And you had sketched kind of uh, the gods, or the Titans and the gods and everything, lineage. And it seemed like it goes from more primordial to more human, with Kronos kind of being this like unfeeling, massive force of nature. He's associated with time itself, with fate, is sort of like the fading of everything. You're just a little tiny mote in this huge, cosmic movement, and you're just a flash in the pan. And then Zeus, he's more relatable. He's the sky, thunder, still primordial elements, but or excuse me, it's more like natural elements now, where it's there's an unpredictability and destructiveness to it, but also life-giving. Um, and then with Dionysus, there he is right here with us in civilization. He teaches us how to cultivate the fruits of the earth. There is and there's a wildness to them, even the look of the vine, as opposed to, say, like some types of trees or anything. And the vine does need this structure. So we have this role, and it's sort of linked with the Apollonian there, where the vine needs this scaffolding on which to grow to bear fruit the best for us, and to do what fruit naturally does if left out on the ground. It will ferment in some way, and animals can get drunk on it and everything. But we've learned how to cultivate that into this thing. Again, here's the Apollonian of beauty, where wine lovers and sommeliers or whatever can talk about all the different forces, and the wind, or the amount of sunlight and the amount of rain and the climate and all that stuff, and the type of soil or whatever, to make this certain kinds of wine or everything. Anyway, it's just this sort of, from the basics of civilization, of cultivation of this plant, to this high sort of culture kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I respond?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
want to cut you off. There's a lot in that. That's so good. Like one, I see like you're drawing the line from Kronos to Zeus, and yeah, Zeus has the storms and the thunder and stuff, but in Kronos, like Kronos is the storm, he is the thunder, he is destruction, he is natural, he is wild, he is time, he is just, and with Zeus, you have the human relationship to Zeus becomes like, oh, you can pray to Zeus, you can propitiate Zeus. Zeus is an intercessor between the wild nature and and humanity, almost a protector figure in this sense.
Mm.
And it's a sort of roundabout way of trying to control nature, of trying to form a civilization. And
Mm.
you have the Olympians that help God, the Olympic pantheon that kind of help form Greece. Um, and I love that Dionysus is he's like you said, he's worshipped in nature, not in the city.
Yeah.
He's sort of this form of wildness and madness, and yet not destructive, but not evil, not made wrong, not made like not cast out. So he's trying to come in. He's this wildness that's trying to come back into civilization. And that link that you made of the structure, the what's the word that the vines grow on? The trellis and the vines, being sort of a mixture of the Apollonian structure, the civilizational structure, and the wilderness sort of winding through it, and the two of them together forming the grapes. That's great. I mean, that would be the ideal blending of the two forces right there. Um, so that's all awesome. And then I wanted to say something about the grapes that I've been thinking about. You described it like the grapes fall, sometimes they ferment, sometimes the animals can get drunk on them. At some point, somebody figured that out and they're like, oh, if we can contain this, if we can get some sort of structure around the process, maybe we can take advantage of this as well. And this is something that occurred to me as far as Dionysus being both a god of wine and a god of, death and or resurrection and or, destruction and rebirth, that back in these days, like grapes, you didn't go to the grocery store. You had grapes in grape season, and you had wheat in wheat season, and you had whatever it was when it was ready to grow. And if you wanted to eat grapes or wheat or something when it was out of season, you couldn't order them from, New Zealand or whatever, hot houses in Mexico. Like you were kind of out of luck. So anything in those days that would take food, which you had to eat when it was ripe or it would spoil. You couldn't necessarily keep because you didn't even have refrigeration. Maybe you could like, I don't know, stick it in a river or something to cool it, but it definitely wouldn't last over a long period. It would still, everything would dissolve. So it was just this constant struggle of finding food. And here you have grapes, which are, sweet. They're forms of nutrition. They grow certain times of the year. But if you take them and if you crush them, if you kill them and destroy them, if you submit them to being torn apart, and then you take that and you put it in a jar and keep it kind of protected, eventually, however it worked, I don't know how they did it in those days, because I'm sure they didn't have vats and all the stuff we have these days, but
Mm.
they would make the wine out of that, and the wine would last. So it was this sort of like death and like wine in and of itself is allowing the death process of the food, putting it through this alchemical transformation into something that you can keep on the shelf in a jar, and it will last for, maybe they didn't have perfect sealing methods, but it definitely would
Mm.
last longer than a grape would.
Yeah.
It would last you at least through the winter. It would last you, until the next vintage. And there was this sense of like you crush the grapes, you put them in the jar, and you seal them. So there's this moment of death. There's this moment of the grapes passing into the underworld, into the darkness,
Mm.
being removed, and
Mm.
then, 3 months. I don't know how long it takes to ferment wine in those days, but like 6 months later, a year later, 3 months later, they would
Mm.
open the jar, and the wine itself would be now drinkable.
Yeah.
And it would be raised to a higher level because it wasn't just grape juice. Now you could get drunk on it, which is
Yeah.
kind of a magical thing if you don't, if you're not doing it all the time. There's
Yeah.
something to that. But I think there, like, it was the first time I've seen the link between the winemaking process, and whether we're talking Dionysus or Christ, the winemaking process and the resurrection process, and the
Yeah.
dying, being in the underworld, coming back, and being like a spiritual being instead of a physical being, somehow a raised up. You're not a grape anymore. You're a wine. You're now wine. You're alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's really
No,
cool.
that's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I didn't think about how, yeah, you have to crush the grapes, you have to disintegrate them, just like these stories of Dionysus. And yeah, there's this life process of there's this natural thing, but then you know how to cultivate it. You're not forcing it into this box exactly. You're giving it the trellis, the structure on which to grow and to bring it to its full fruition, which is kind of like a human being and good education, you know. And then, yes, and then you bring it to this death process. And at at the end, when you're ready to drink it after a long time, when it's in darkness and it's been fermenting, then then you're ready to drink it. And that itself can bring out transformation in you and the community. You guys have a party. Of course, many writers have and of course, it brings them to destruction too, sometimes after decades of alcoholism. But there is this, many writers talk about this transformation from alcohol. You can talk about psychedelics and other types of, um, what do cognitive scientists call it? It's disruptive processes. Anyway, it's supposedly with human beings and even with AIs, you have to disrupt their logic in some way for them to be creative. So that the logic leads them down this A equals B equals C, and you can't get creative if you're like that. You have to disrupt that process in some way to get creative. And so that wildness into education, into disintegration, into death and transformation after a time. And then that brings out some transformation in the human being and the society. And hopefully, yeah, it's the good type of creativity that you can bring about in a good religious ritual with wine, or a good family gathering, or a good party, and you don't, someone doesn't get knifed at the end, something like that. So, yeah,
Yeah, or have their head torn off and stuck on a spear.
yeah, that's a bad party.
That's a bad party. Yeah, no,
That's
thank you.
unforgettable, though.
Well, that's true. That's true. They'll write a play about it. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I mean, that force that you're talking about is Dionysus, I think, that force of like, that thing that comes from outside and disrupts us, and that we might think is the devil. We might think is
Yeah,
something trying to stop us. We might think is, oh, it's in our way, but it's coming through and it's bringing change. And if and here, like it, I'm seeing the imagery of that white tree and the spring of forgetting from the Orphic papyrus,
mm,
and the other stream of memory, the other pond of memory. And when you die and you go into the underworld, when the energy comes through and it's disrupted, when you're crushed and you're grapes and you're in the jar and everything around you is falling apart. Um, if you go towards forgetfulness, you're lost. If the civilization goes into disruption and forgets its civilized nature, forgets the goodness that it had, forgets sort of the thing that led it down that logical journey in the first place, the sort of, oh, it can be good, it can be this. If they forget that, then everything just dissolves. Maybe metaphorically, the wine goes bad. You open it up and it's spoiled. It's vinegar. You can't drink this. You got to get rid of it. Oh, that waste. What a waste. Whereas if you go down and you drink from the pool of memory and you remember what you had originally, you remember
yeah,
that structure that gave birth, that needed to be destroyed, but you remember that structure is possible, and you're able to kind of, butterfly, caterpillars, when they go into the cocoon, they turn entirely into soup. There is no structure left inside that cocoon, and out of that soup, it rebuilds itself into a butterfly.
oh geez,
You
wow,
know, and we can do the same thing if, when we are in the underworld, we drink from memory and not forgetfulness. You know,
yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
really, really like that myth. That is from the Orphic kind of tradition, this sort of the prophet or Orpheus of the prophet of Dionysus, and he had his own worshippers or his own cult, and they kind of this is from their tradition,
I
or
think
it's
so. Yeah, yeah. There were, so there's sort of, it gets complicated because one, like I would need a week of proper research to
mm,
spell all this out, and I haven't done that.
mm,
So caveat up front.
mm,
But the thing to keep in mind is you have the figure of Orpheus and the myths around him, which I'll run through real quickly in a minute. But then you also have the actual practices of the Orphic tradition and the stories that they tell. So those are kind of separate in that you have the myths of Orpheus. He was a member of the Argonauts with Jason in search of the Golden Fleece.
mm.
He when the Argonauts came upon the sirens, he just played his music loud enough that they couldn't hear, and his music was beautiful enough that they passed right by the sirens. So,
Wow, interesting.
so there you have a little bit of like, beauty and skill overcoming addiction or whatever you want the sirens to be, overcoming sort of that pull
Mm,
seduction.
wow.
But then but then later and so he's described as a priest of, and again, this is spotty research on my part, but this
Mm,
is the best I can put my pieces together.
mm.
He's described as a priest or a follower of Dionysus. Um, and so he's a musician. I can imagine there's plenty of stories and plenty of experience. We were just talking about concerts earlier of musicians creating, the listomania back in the Franz Liszt of the
Oh,
composer. He would drive the Beatles, people screaming. Like there's definitely a Dionysian undercurrent in many forms of music, regardless of rock and roll or classical or, Orpheus with the harp, maybe, who knows? There's this stream of music being a wild making thing, an
yeah.
introduction of these foreign elements. We get stuck in this logical ego, this ABC, like you were saying, the ego, and we need something to come in and disrupt that. Music can do that, theater can do that, alcohol can do that. Many of these things can be disruptive in a growing kind of a way.
Yeah.
Um, so you have Orpheus being this sort of musician doing that, and he's well known, and he maybe at this point has started a mystery school, I would assume, if we're going to sort of place the mystery school within the arc of his own mythology, it would probably be somewhere in here. But at some point he meets Eurydice, who he falls madly in love with. And she's beautiful, she's wonderful. They're well matched and they're going to be married. And the one version of the story I was able to find, she on the wedding day, she gets attacked by a satyr, little goat guys,
Mm.
who tries to rape her because they were all about raping people in Greece. I don't understand. I need somebody to explain that to me because it's pretty crazy how much how much everybody was raping everybody else. Like it was just sort of like, stealing somebody's wallet or something. But he tries to have his way with her, and she escapes, but she falls into a pit of vipers and is bit on the heel by, I think, by one of the vipers, and she dies. So she is attacked and she dies tragically on their wedding day. Orpheus is overtaken with grief, is singing these songs of grief. The gods are weeping, the nymphs are weeping, everybody is just torn apart by the grief. And then somebody comes to him and suggests, hey, why don't you go to the underworld and rescue her? And now I don't remember hearing this in any of the stories, but to my mind, if I'm the priest of Dionysus and I hear this story about how Dionysus went down and rescued his mother from the underworld, and I know the mysteries of Dionysus, whatever those, we don't know, but whatever those happen to be, maybe there was something in there about going into the underworld and being able to negotiate with the Lord of the underworld, who Hades or Dionysus Agrius, whatever we're talking about here, negotiating with him and being able to bring something back. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to do that. And he goes down. He speaks to, in this myth, he speaks to Hades and Persephone, and he plays the music. Maybe I assume that's kind of his thing, and they're moved, and they're like, yes, we'll let you take your wife back with you, but you have to. She has to follow you out of the underworld, and you cannot turn around and look at her until you are both back in the above ground. And so he does it, and he hears her behind him, but he's uncertain. Maybe they're playing a trick on me. Maybe it's somebody else. I don't know. All these worries running through his head the whole time. But he gets up to the top, and right at the door, he like steps out into the light. And before she steps out, he turns and looks at her. And so like he loses, basically. He fails his task right at the very last minute as she's about to step into the sunlight. He can't wait any longer. He turns and tries to see to make sure it's her, and it is her, but then she's pulled back into the underworld. And he is without his wife, and he is despairing again. Um, I don't know the Orphic mythos, as I've been repeatedly saying, but the end of the tale of Orpheus is that he is no longer worshiping Dionysus. He turns to the worship of Apollo and climbs a mountain to watch the sunrise and sing hymns to the sun as it's rising, the sun being Apollo. And the Maenids, the followers of Dionysus, don't like this. And either Dionysus is upset with Orpheus for turning towards Apollo, or the Maenids are upset because Orpheus won't. They find him very attractive, but he wants nothing to do with them. There's some strands that Orpheus was started sleeping with young men, little boys, like they did in Greece. It wasn't quite as bad as we think of it these days. It's kind of a thing they did at a certain time. But in any case, whatever it is, you see Orpheus is having a broken heart. And if he had gone down to the underworld to save his wife, and even more so, if the Lord of the underworld is Dionysus, through the Orphic tradition, as I was sort of implying earlier, you have Orpheus going down there and speaking to his god and saying, "Give me my wife, please." And the god puts this task before him that he fails at, and he loses his wife. No wonder he doesn't want to worship Dionysus anymore. No wonder he doesn't want to sleep with the Dionysian women. No wonder he like turns his back on all that, whether he's sleeping with boys or not. I don't know. That's obviously a different world, terrible nowadays. But whatever it is, he's turned his back on all that stuff, and he's now doing the Apollo thing. And the Maenids go up to him and they tear him limb from limb, just like that. I forget, but that prince you were talking about when Dionysus comes back is still a human, whose mother has his head on the staff, just like Dionysus was torn apart by the Titans. You have Orpheus also ripped apart, in this case by the Maenids. And his head and his lyre, which Apollo was the god of music, so it's not entirely weird that he was like attracted to the Apollo worship. But his head, Orpheus's head and his lyre float down the river, and they end up like coming ashore on some island where he prophesies. His head just stays there and prophecies for a long time, and people will come and visit and listen to the prophecies of Orpheus's head. And then I think Apollo comes at some point and is like, "Okay, you can rest now." And he kind of, I don't know what he does, but he puts him to sleep, puts him to death, kind of ends his suffering. And if we tack that whole story, or we hold that whole story up against the Nietzschean, Apollonian, Dionysian, the structure and the form versus the craziness coming in, the new thing coming in, you have in the story of Orpheus someone who was part of this force of this new energy, but was not able to let go of his wife, was not able to let go of something that he loved, but that had died. And if you are going to work with this new energy, you have to be able to let yourself dissolve completely. If you don't let yourself dissolve completely, you will be torn apart by it, because you're summoning up destruction, but you are not letting it embody you. And so whatever constraints you put against the destruction, those, to the degree that you hold on to them, they will be destroyed. You will be destroyed with them, I think. And you also see that in at least the version that I read of Pentheus, that's his name, of the king, in that he wants to go and partake of the Dionysian rites by watching. He wants to hide and see what they're about. He doesn't want to actually get involved. So again, there's a distancing from this destructive rebirthing force that can come through. And so if
Mm.
you hold yourself apart from it, you are destroyed by it.
Mm.
If you are of the old order, you are destroyed by it. But if you embody if you let it come into you and you move with it, you let it move you, you let it destroy you, you go down into the underworld, you let yourself be crushed like the grapes, and you remember that you will make it through to, the Elysian fields, or you'll become the wine, and you let that happen, then you're kind of saved. Um, but Orpheus doesn't do that, and it's questionable. Maybe you could say that's why Greek civilization ended. It's a story, it's a myth or a metaphor of sort of the Greeks getting a little too caught up with the head, the intellect, The head is left behind, the songs of the head are left behind, but the whole body is gone. It's been
Mm.
torn apart, and eventually Apollo comes, civilization comes and like shuts down the head, and that's kind of the end of it. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah,
that's an interesting. Yeah, that makes sense to me that a culture would be in decline when it's ignoring the whole body, the whole soul, rather, and it's yeah, thinking too much of the head. You can think of the head as sort of like the structures of civilization, the laws and everything. And there's interesting discussion about how, there's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, and you need the people and interpreters of the law to know how to navigate all that. You need to, there's a complexity there, and you cannot just go by the book all the time. And maybe there's something about how a society gets too top heavy and it's just trying to go by the book and mechanically try things in the past that have worked without having that body or spirit to guide how to do it, and to have the spirit of how to go forward.
yeah, yeah. That I mean, what you're pointing, the picture you're painting right there is like the Dionysian urge to stop the over the top heavy, to come in and like stop it from going in that direction, and disrupt it, like you were saying earlier. It lives in the body,
Mm.
the Dionysian, it's the Dionysian energy is, if you are a civilization or a person or whatever, and you are stuck in your head only, um, the Dionysian urge, the urge for rebirth, is in the underworld. It's in the unconscious. It's been exiled from the kingdom. It's been sent wandering through India, and now it returns, and it has to be recognized for the new god that it is.
Mm.
And it comes up out of the body. Like you're saying, and like you were saying before, it's that natural force of the grapes. It's nature, the wilderness coming forth again within the civilization to disrupt and renew it. And to the
Mm.
extent that we allow that to happen to ourselves, while maintaining that memory of what's possible, not dissolving into despair, not dissolving into drunkenness,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
but
that's
also not getting stuck in the overly top heavy, like you were saying. So it's
yeah.
being able to balance those two.
Yeah, I think that yeah, we keep pointing to a balance, in your mind. This is of course very related to meditation. You're doing breathing meditation, your mind keeps wandering, but then you're not forcing it back, and you're not trying to figure out a system of how to keep your mind on the breath all the time, but you're just gently bringing it back, gently bringing it back. Um, I was thinking with that story you told of Orpheus, Dionysus's prophet that kind of lost his way when after his beloved wife died, and he knew of a way to go down into the underworld to get her. And yes, he has courage He has skill to negotiate with the god of the underworld and Persephone. And so he's like Dionysus in that way, right? He goes down to get a woman, although there's maybe interesting that Dionysus got the mother he never knew. But as you're pointing out, Orpheus is getting the wife that maybe he couldn't let go of. So there's maybe a fundamental difference there. But anyway, he's able to, not through force, but through skill, negotiation, perhaps, probably music, some kind of intellectual, spiritual kind of social kind of thing. He's able to win them over. And but then they give him that task and he cannot complete it. And I was thinking that so his wife is walking behind him, but he's not allowed to look back at her. And he's going this long journey up through the underworld, and he gets out into the light, and so he passes the threshold. And so, like in the earlier myth, he needs to keep that thread of what his task really is to remember, but he doesn't. He passes the threshold, and then he's like, "Okay, and then he goes with his fear, right? His fear and desire. Is my wife really there? Is my mind just playing tricks on me? Maybe they are just screwing with me." And then he has to look back for the proof. He cannot feel it. He cannot live with faith and with that attention. And then, yeah, he truly loses his wife after
Yeah.
that. He truly loses his love. And then, from what you're saying, he loses his faith in Dionysus. He has no more desire. He kind of becomes like this ascetic. I was thinking sort of like even in the Buddha's journey, where in the Buddha's journey, being the ascetic was part of the journey, but it was not the end. It was kind of the in the later on he took the middle path, right, which is kind of rejecting asceticism. You cannot starve yourself enough to gain enlightenment, right? That's not exactly the way. And I was thinking he goes up to a hill, he's alone, he's trying to commune with Dionysus with pure music, maybe pure logic or something like that, and that's when he gets torn apart. The ravages of nature, or whatever the Maenids represent, all the chaos and the forces and violence of nature that he has not been communing with in some way. It could be sexual communion in the story or whatever, but they come and they dissolve him, and then
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Just to clarify, you had said he's up there singing to Dionysus, but
oh, sorry, yeah, I meant
yeah, he's up
Apollo.
there,
Yeah,
Apollo, yeah.
yeah.
I choose to start with that clarification because what you were pointing to is a person who did not, in that last final moment of where he had to sort of surrender his fears and his anxieties and step forward one more step with faith and wait for her. Like that moment, I can feel it in my system of like it's akin to death. Like you're taking that final step
Yeah,
and you don't know what's going to happen.
yeah,
And if you can just take that last step, it's going to be resolved one way or the other. You're going to like, and you can't do anything about it. And so
yeah.
to lose faith in that moment and turn
Right.
is to hold on to something. Like you were saying,
Yeah,
it's the fear instead of the faith. It's the, I need to have the structure. I cannot let the structure go. It's the last little piece of structure that he needs to let go in that moment through faith, which you hold through the memory rather than drinking from the well of forgetting and just being like forgetting the task, like you were saying. He has to remember the task. And if he remembers the task and steps forward in faith, he'll have that one moment of like, oh man, it's done. I still don't know if that's her, but whatever it is out here with me now. And he could turn and he would have the thing that he had lost been, brought back to him. But he lost that moment of faith, and he lost the chance at rebirth. And so if we are mapping Orpheus onto a civilization, you have a civilization who did not allow itself to die, did not allow itself to die and be reborn, did not allow itself to die while remembering the task it was supposed to carry forward. And I think that's something we need to remember in the world today. There's a lot of our civilizations that are our societies that are crumbling, the structures are crumbling. And if we forget who we are, when they crumble, we will crumble with them. Or if we hold on to the old ways, we'll be this ascetic bard singing on a mountaintop, trying to avoid the wildness that's trying to be born into the world, and the
Yeah.
wildness will tear us apart because our head is the only thing that we're paying attention to. We're not in our body. We're not letting this life force move us. We're not letting the new world be born through us. We are stuck in the old ways, and we will be torn apart with them if we don't let go, if we don't have faith, if we don't remember the task that we were instructed with from the beginning and carry that forward through the changes, through the disruption that Dionysus brings. If we don't carry it forward, then we we're lost. But if we carry it forward every step of the way and have faith that even as it's dying, something new will be reborn, then we get the nice future, you know.
Yeah,
I,
that's a kind of a prophetic warning. Um, and that seems like we should take heed of that to go forward, to not look back too much, but carry forward the good things still in the soil, in our body, in our soul.
yeah, yeah. Have faith in Dionysus.
Yeah. And then yeah, and that is kind of I thought you're saying that Orpheus's journey with his wife out of the underworld is like a death, and you have to kind of, yeah, going into any type of transformation or death, which is the ultimate kind of transformation for us that we're afraid of, and that we probably make a lot of mistakes because of that fear as a civilization or as a person. If you can, yeah, let go and have faith that this is the natural process. And I think the invoking of nature brings Dionysus back into the picture, back into the story, whereas Orpheus had pushed him away. Um, yeah, leads to that transformation and that new birth.
Yeah, certainly did not have all of this in mind when I first read these, but I knew there was a thread there to follow. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think we can, I was mapping it a minute ago onto civilizations, whether it's the Greeks or whether it's our current culture, the meaning crisis, whatever it is, the meaning crisis, we're too much in our head. We need to let that life force come back up and generate a new meaning.
Mm,
We have to let the old meaning die while holding on to the faith that meaning is possible
mm,
and that the spirit of meaning is not encapsulated by the old ways, that the old ways can die and we can still have something new on the other side that we can sort of place our faith in. But I also think that this is sort of our challenges humans like every day, to not be stuck in, well, I already know how this is going to turn out.
yeah.
I don't need to try. I mean, me right now, just to kind of map this onto something personal, like I'm doing my newsletter. I'm struggling to get my writing and my sort of guidance work out into the world so I can work with people. Um, and like this is something I've been thinking about doing. It's a dream I've been following for 5 or 6 years, if not longer. I mean, it's a little hard to say where it starts at, but this latest iteration of it, like I was planning this newsletter for years before I finally started it, and man, like so when COVID hit, my wife and I were running a guest house business. We had a big home we were renting, and we had people come and stay in different rooms, and they'd come and they'd stay. And so we had like 3 or 4 listings on Airbnb, and we were doing well enough to pay a ridiculous rent for the house, and still that was our whole income. Lovely life. Um, COVID hit and the whole thing died. I was terrified. I had the closest thing to a nervous breakdown I think I've had in my life. I was also trying to quit smoking at the time because smoking in COVID, I thought maybe not the best thing to be doing. This is early COVID. We didn't know what the fuck, but it was a lung thing. And I was like, I need to quit smoking anyway. This is a good, I can use this fear to make something healthy happen for me.
Mm.
But so, nicotine withdrawal and life falling apart and everything, it was a death and rebirth moment for me. And I could very easily have given up. I could have said, no, it has to be this house, turn back like, you know, Orpheus does, tried to make it be what it had been before. I could have completely given up. I could have said, screw it. One of the options was to move with my wife's family in Florida or maybe with my family in California, which we were down to do, and everybody was very supportive if we had to. But I was like, no, I want to try and make something work here, where I built a life, where we've built a life, we have friends, we have community, we love it here, we don't want to leave. So there's this, like, my whole life had fallen apart, but I wanted to have faith that that it would resurrect itself. And I started working food delivery. Or I had been doing that already, but I started doing that full time, and it was enough to get us into the place we're living now. And I struggled along with that for a long time, and then was enough to get by, but wasn't enough to make anything really grow. So it felt very much like a stuck structure. I couldn't move. The food delivery money, I don't know, they changed the algorithm, they changed how much they pay us. Whatever it was, I stopped making as much money as I was making. It wasn't supporting us. My car died. The battery in my car died. So again, it was like a second death cycle. And I could have been like, okay, this time we're getting out of the house, we're moving, we're just done. I'm done with all of this. Or I need to keep doing food delivery because that's all I know. And I didn't do either of those things. I was like, I need to find work. And I found work doing the AI training that I do now, this sort of remote work. Came out of nowhere. Didn't work, took a couple of false starts with it. I felt like I was trying to like start a gas stove where the lighter wouldn't click and it wouldn't click and it wouldn't click. And then finally whoosh. And that worked for 6 to 10 months, maybe almost a year from the time I first got hired by them until the next disaster. And then I was working at this company, and all of a sudden the project I was on ended, and I had no income, and I had been supporting my wife and myself, and we had nothing. We had a little bit of savings, thankfully, so that sort of brought us through. But again, it was this moment of my whole life has died. What do I do? Do I keep trying to tear at this one AI company for work? Do I give up entirely? No and no. What do I do? How do I carry forward? And I moved forward, and I had faith that something would coalesce back around me. And my wife found a job. I found a job with another company, and it was in that very moment. In fact, I lost the job on a Saturday at 11 o'clock. Saturday. Wednesday night, I had decided to start a 3-day fast. Water fast, only water for 72 hours. Yes, 72 hours. So I had my last meal Wednesday night. Thursday, drank water, took it easy. I had to work, so I was still working, but it's all computer work. So I just lay on the couch and do the computer work. Thursday goes by, I do pretty well. Friday goes by, I do really well. Saturday comes through. I might have my days off, but whatever. For the sake of the story, I'm just going to go with this structure. Saturday comes through. In the morning, I have this really transformative experience in therapy. I've been working with this guy, and something really kind of clicked in that moment. And I'm ready. Like the whole point of the fast, I forgot to say this part from the beginning. The whole point of the fast was like I had felt stuck with this newsletter. I had been planning it like the whole time I was doing the food delivery. I'm driving around, go to McDonald's. I'd wait at McDonald's. I had this idea. I should write this thing. I'd
Yeah.
type it down on my notes on my phone, but it never actually became anything. It was always just like notes on my phone, notes on my phone, notes on my phone. And I was finally like, I need to take a step. I need to like bring my energy together to do this. And so that was the intention of the fast was to sort of trim myself down and kind of just dedicate myself to making an effort in this way.
Mm.
And 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 so I have this pretty great experience in therapy. I'm feeling like this is great. This is the last day of the fast. I'm going to eat dinner tonight at 9 o'clock. It'll have been 72 hours from Wednesday night, whatever days those were. Um, I'm ready to go. I get off from therapy and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get into work for the next few hours, make some more money, get some work done, and then I'll have dinner tonight. As soon as I sign into work, I find out that the project is done unexpectedly, out of nowhere. We had thought it was going to expand. And it felt again like the one thing I had hinged my life on had fallen apart, had broken down, had died, and yet here I was ready to start my newsletter. Here I was ready to finally just rely on this money and start my new thing. And as I'm ready to start my new thing, the one thing I was relying on falls away. And as I'm sure you can guess, since I'm still working on my newsletter, I never gave up on that. I'm up to, I think, the 50th or 52nd post on it. And I have a different job. Like my wife got a job. I have a job. We're making more money now than we were when I was employed myself, just myself. Um, I don't want to say that every time, something could happen tomorrow. I could lose my job. My wife could lose her job. Something tragic could happen and something good could not come of it. I don't know, but I have tried to hold that faith through every step of the process. And I have been through enough deaths and rebirths in the last 5 to 6 years that like there's a way you can go about it. Um, I don't know how to say what that way is. I don't think there's a formula to it, but you can read the stories and the stories give us hints. And I think that that's true. And if we can map that back onto the world for a minute, that's what I wish for the world, for our civilization. I want us to die and be reborn. I want us to continue on and have faith that something good is going to come, because that's the only way something good comes, is if we have faith. If we don't have faith, it could come and we wouldn't even see it.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, man. I didn't know. I knew parts of that story, but I didn't know you'd gone through so much in the past several years.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't talk about it much, and I don't know why I'm talking about it here publicly, but it felt necessary because I really wanted to illustrate this Dionysian transition that we're talking about. And if stories from my life are the thing that my subconscious provides to me, it says, hey, here's this whole structure about what's going on for you. I'm like, okay, I'm telling however many people are going to watch this throughout the future of YouTube, as long as this channel's up, or, the podcast network, like everybody knows this about me now. I don't know what's going to come of this, but I have faith and I'm not going to retract it. I'm going to step forward all the way every time, step after step, and trust that whatever that new energy is that's coming up in me, that it's going to lead to something good. Because if I don't, there's a line in the Gospel of Thomas: if you bring forth what is within you, what is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what is within you will destroy you.
Mhm. Yeah,
And I
that's
think
great.
that's exactly what we're talking about. I had not put that together till this moment, but I think that's exactly the Dionysian current that we are calling up into the world through this podcast in this moment.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I like how, yeah, it seems like this Dionysian spirit and story, you're using it to structure and to kind of reflect on things that have happened in your life, and it's kind of like true faith is supposed to be, giving you strength.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's something that I went through somewhat blindly, but now I can derive meaning from it. Now, and through the use of these old stories, I'm able to tell it to myself in kind of a new way. So it's like stories are resurrected in my life because I took the time to read them, and they are showing my life, showing me meaning that was sort of hidden in my life that I didn't necessarily see without their help. But it's the same universal patterns.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I am, what we are trying to do with this podcast, with our various tales, Grimm's brothers and everything, trying to kind of bring forth. It's not merely entertainment. It's yeah, we're trying to kind of bring forth this energy and kind of get it into people's heads, and then they can live it in their lives, and then share these stories. And some of them will be storytellers themselves and share it anew, and then things grow and the stories change somewhat and grow and then merge with others. And that's a little bit like Dionysus's origins himself, right? And from there's this obscurity, there's this mixing, there's the different facets, different faces, and yeah, out of that creativity, new life is born.
Yeah, yeah, I'm seeing everything you're describing. I'm seeing the grapes on the trellis that you were talking about earlier, that sort of the wild growth structured to provide, better nourishment. Um, yeah, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't go too much into my own story, but as you were talking, I was also reflecting on my life, and there is a general parallel there of kind of even going back to high school, having understood this creative urge in me through that movie that we made in high school,
Right.
uh, and then starting to write when I was in college, um, and kind of seeing that I really kind of needed that, and then I just forgot it. I just abandoned it, and I can't tell you why. It's kind of like something of just, the mind loses focus if you don't give it the structure, you don't, the artist way, you don't do your morning pages writing or something like that.
Mhm.
And that's a little like the stories we've read where there's a transition, and then there's a forgetting for me. And then for me there was a long period of, and I'm still a little bit in it, the being in the underworld, being having forgotten, being lost, remembering in an intellectual way things about me from that made themselves manifest in the past, but there being just a wraith like uh, quality to them, where I wasn't, it didn't wasn't embodied in my life. And I think I'm slowly kind of coming out of that underworld, and I should thank you a lot for helping to bring me out of that. The I had already started the podcast with LL, and but yeah, it I had always wanted to have other guests and everything, and you're helping to bring new life into this, and a different face of it, um, and that's helping to inspire more kind of gumption, spirit, and and energy that I want to bring forward, and to make it into sort of what seemed like the right intention for this in the first place. So,
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I'm happy to have been a, contributing positive factor. I have found these conversations very enlivening myself. There's something about, um, I don't know if it's your interview facility or just the fact that, we're fairly old friends, even though we sort of drifted apart there for a while. But we have this shared history. But there's just something about the vibe of these conversations that um, I can't get it from my newsletter. It's not the newsletters are heady. They're me writing a thing and sending it out. And maybe I get like one or two comments. It's probably from my mom and dad, to be honest. You know, I've got a number of people reading, but there could always be more. But there's something alive, I think, because you're here, because there's another person that I can't do on my own. And I think this kind of work is so important. And I'm glad that other people get to see it, and I hope it does them some kind of a benefit. We are definitely, I think, of a like mind as far as trying to bring this energy out into the world. So yeah, I think let's just keep doing that.
Yeah, yeah, man, that sounds great.
Yeah, yeah.
So nothing more on Dionysus or anything. We're ready to kind of call it a day for now.
I think so. I think we fed him pretty well. I hope he's happy. I'm grateful. I'm seeing that whole thing in a new light. I'm seeing the arc of his story and his sort of circular spiral like journey through Greece. Um,
Yeah, spiral
is
like. Yes, excellent.
yeah, yeah. Um, is newly revealed to me through this conversation. So I'm grateful for how he has fed me slash us slash the audience for this time as well.
Okay, all right, sounds great.
Yeah,
Well, it was good talking to you, and I hope to I think we'll return to Dionysus at some point, or at least in some way, as is his nature.
I'm sure he'll be back.
Sounds good. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.